Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and this is the show where I review all the comics I've read this week in one show. We go least favorite to best pick of the week and everything in between. And before I get started, we do the viewer's pick of the week at the end of the video, so in the comments below, let me know your pick of the week for a chance to be featured. So let's get started. I had 14 books this week. Pretty heavy haul. Number 14 for me is The Amazing Spider-Man issue 68. I haven't been loving this arc because I feel like it's very repetitive, things we've seen before. The writing's on the wall in a lot of areas too, because obviously Peter ends up being like, I don't want to be Spider-Man for reasons I don't think that were very strong. And then of course in the end he's like, you know what, I do got to be Spider-Man. And the way it's convinced is, I thought, was not as strong as it could be as well. I don't love the villains here, and a lot of this issue has to do with the villains. And then in the end Peter dies, and you know Peter's not gonna die. It just doesn't feel like there's any stakes, there's any emotion in this book. I thought the artwork was solid, but I'm just not loving the direction of Spider-Man. So giving that 1.5 stars, and then it's number 14. Moving on to number 13, Ultimate Wolverine issue 2. I was surprised to see this so low. I know a lot of people have been liking this book, but I feel like this is a book about tension. It's about building that tension and ambiance, and I don't feel like the artwork is strong enough for that. It feels a little muddy to me. I am gonna give this book one more issue because we have Kitty and Gambit coming up in the next issue, and I love Kitty, so I was like, all right, I'll give that, but other than that, I think it's a very slow book, again, that relies on environment, and I just don't think that's there right now. So giving that 2 stars, and then is number 13. Moving on to let's see, we're up to number 12, which is Laura Kinney, Wolverine, issue 3. I feel like the artwork could be stronger here. That's something that brought it down a bit. It doesn't really feel like a Laura book. You have her teaming up with Elektra here, and then in the end of the issue, we get to see Winter Soldier. And I'm like, these characters don't feel like they're meshing with Laura. I feel like this doesn't really feel like a Laura book, like as a solo series. They've been adding too many characters to guest star instead of just giving Laura some meat here, especially because the artwork is not as strong too. It brings this a little lower to 2 stars. So that is number 13. That's number 12, actually, sorry. Moving on to number 11. A book I really love, but it has been going down a little bit for me, and that's Wonder Woman issue 18. The artwork is great for this book. I really love the ambiance for this one, but the story is very Tom King, and it's kind of gotten to a point where every issue is the same thing. It's just very, very repetitive, and the story just doesn't move. This whole issue is Wonder Woman going into the White House. That's really the only thing that's happening here. I just want it to pick up a bit because we've been prolonging for so long to kind of get to this moment. So giving that one 2.5 stars, and that is number 11. Moving on to number 10, which is Titans in Love, issue 20. So just Titans, their Valentine's Day issue, and they really lean into it. They lean into the Valentine's stuff, which I don't feel like the story needed. I do feel like this needs to find its footing a bit. I really like it when it has to do with Donna and her just dealing with what she should be as a leader. The other interpersonal stuff I'm glad we have, but I don't know if it's meshing for me. And I like the coloring a lot for this book, but I don't love the art style. There's some times where the faces look a little weird. So giving this one 2.5 stars. Still picking it up, still want to see where it goes, but it's not quite there for me yet. All right, moving on to number 9, which is the Uncanny X-Men issue 10. I like this book. I do feel like it has 2 identities when it's focusing on the new characters and the old, and honestly, I'm kind of more interested in the new characters, believe it or not, than Nightcrawler and the rest, and I keep wanting to see them. And, you know, the reason why this is a little lower is because the artwork is so drastically different than David Marquez's art that it just doesn't really fit for this book, in my opinion. It just feels a little muddier than it usually is, even though I usually like this artist with indie books and maybe grittier titles. That I don't think this title is, even with this issue being about this character who might die, then doesn't end up dying. But, you know, I like the chemistry between these new characters. That's definitely what I've been enjoying the most and want to see where that goes. So giving that 3 stars, and that is number 9. And then on to number 8, which is Power Rangers Prime issue 4. I just love seeing a comic where you never had a season of Power Rangers to set that up in the show. And it feels like its own season that's allowed to be mature and to kind of find its own footing and its own identity. all while you have like the V-Trooper stuff. You know, there's a lot of things that Power Rangers fans can glob onto, all while feeling new and fresh. So it's your origin stories. How did these people become Rangers? And I'm having a good time with it. So giving that 3 stars, and that is number 8. Moving on to number 7, which is The Question All Along the Watchtower, issue 4. I just love how connected this is to the DC universe. I think the villain's cool, Cyborg Superman. I like the interpersonal relationships, characters that you normally wouldn't see, like Batwoman and Animal Man showing up. It's just a fun series, solid artwork. And if you like the DC universe, you like everything going on with All In, I feel like this is a cool companion series to elevate all the storytelling you're already reading. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 7. Moving on to number 6, a book I normally don't get, but it's a crossover, so I'm getting it. And that is Miles Morales' Spider-Man, issue 30. I'm reading Deadpool. I'm not currently reading Spider-Man. I will say I don't know if this book convinces me to read Spider-Man. I think there's a reason why I haven't been loving this chapter of Miles Morales, but I like his interaction with Deadpool and what Cody's been doing with Deadpool. And I like the art a lot here. The cliffhanger feels a little bit more for Spider-Man fans. I'm like, who are these two? I don't know who those characters are, but I liked Deadpool's daughter, especially interactions with Miles Morales. Here's some good back and forth. There's some good breaking the fourth wall jokes, and I just kind of had a fun time with the chemistry with everybody. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 6. Moving on to number 5, which is X Factor issue 7. If you love comedy, I really recommend this. I'm not a huge fan of the One World Under Doom stuff so far, but I felt like this tied into it very well and broke away from its story by still telling its story, which kind of is hard with tie-ins, but here it felt like an X Factor book, all while it's dealing with the Doom stuff. And I liked, the social commentary that Mark Russell tends to do with like AI and how that connects to the X-Men. Now this One World Under Doom story. The artwork is amazing by Bob Quinn. I think he just does some perfect work here. It's, again, everything you kind of want from X Factor. It's these underdogs trying to deal with these big problems and, maybe not having a fun time doing it. And that's pretty much what this issue is as well. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, this is being a bit higher because the show's actually out and I understand what's going on. The Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man issue 3. They probably should just release this once everyone saw the show, because now I get the vibe and I could get into this story a bit better. And I think the artwork fits really well for the style that's from the show. I think it translates really well. And I just like Peter here. It's Peter wanting to join the football team, thinking he'll get a scholarship. And then he's like, oh, even me having spider powers doesn't make me a good football player. And he finds out other ways to make money and be a better spider hero, all while he's interacting with Nico and his friends. I just think they balanced the Spider-Man and Peter stuff really well, and it connects to the show in a way that you don't need to read this comic to watch the show and vice versa, but they connected enough where it's like, okay, this feels like a tie-in. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to the topic of the video, number 3, Zatanna. Should you pick it up? Obviously, it's in my top 5, so I think you should. What I like about this book is that it's very different from that previous Zatanna Black Label book, which I loved. I love Mariko's work there. But it kind of showcases a different side of Zatanna, but still celebrates Zatanna like that previous book did. This, especially because Jamal Campbell is the artist and writer, focuses more on the visuals and the trickery of magic and Zatanna. And I like that. I thought that was a cool setup to kind of make this feel really different. The artwork was blow your mind great. I like this new villain that they're kind of testing here. There's some twists and turns with Zatanna's crew. I do think this is not going to be a very grounded story. Obviously, the previous one was, and we'll see as that goes on, but I think it worked really well. There's some times where I wanted the story to kind of slow down a little bit, but visually, this was such an interesting book, and it definitely captivates you to want to read more. She kind of ends up in a weird place in the end. We're like, okay. So yeah, definitely add it to your pull list. I think if you've never heard of Zatanna, it kind of gives you an idea of who she is, and it's a unique twist on a character that's not a Superman and Batman, but is popular and has its cult fan base and has different versions of her character. There's just been so many different styles of Zatanna, so to have something distinct is really cool and unique. So giving that 4 stars, and that is number 3. Moving on to number 2, really glad that this is as high as it is. It's been a little lower lately, and that is The Incredible Hulk issue 22. Goes back to basics. I really like the monster stuff. It reminds me a lot of Immortal Hulk, where we get to see Charlie dealing with being a monster and what that means to her and her relationship to Hulk. There's some other monster people going around. There's maybe some, I don't know, I thought it looked like werewolves in the beginning. So I just like the monster aspect. I think previous arcs has been a little bit more on the darker side and in the head of Hulk and Charlie. Now we get to see that more body horror that I like about Hulk and what I enjoyed about Immortal Hulk. And the artwork fits really well for this. I think Klein is doing the art again, and that fits very nicely. Yeah, Klein's back on it. So good issue, very solid, and I hope the book kind of sticks to this for a while. So give me that 4 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to number 1, guys, if you watch the show, you know what the number 1 is. I just love this book, and that is Exceptional X-Men issue 6. It's everything I want from a Kinney book, but it's also everything I've ever wanted from an X-Men book, which really helps this issue because it's not really a kiddie issue. It's more dealing with those new kids and how they deal with being mutants and wanting to be on their own. And it focuses on a character we hadn't seen in the past as much. He was kind of in the background, and how he's more visually, you can see as a mutant. He connects to this guy who runs a company and they're trying to get jobs for it, but he's also kind of selling the DNA of people. Kitty's like, no, stay away from him, and everyone's like, this is not a good idea, but our character's like, well, he looks like me. He might not be a bad guy. And I really love this kind of morally gray aspect of humans could be good, humans can be bad, mutants can be good, mutants can be bad. And funneling that through Kitty Pryde, who doesn't really know if she's a good or bad person, and if the X-Men did the right thing, because she did kill people. And I love the moral grayness of this book. And I like that Kitty's also just trying to fight to be normal too. Like, she's having this relationship with this girl, seems like things are going well, and she just wants to go to the 90th birthday party of her girlfriend's grandma, and she doesn't even know if that's the right thing. It's like, am I allowed to drag this person into this? And I like how balanced the relationships are between human and mutant. There's some humans that are good friends with mutants and vice versa, and what that looks like in this world that tends not to be showcased in X-Men titles. Artwork is also incredible for this book. I just think there's so much to talk about, and it feels lived in this world where sometimes superhero books kind of rush into just the superheroics and forget to feel lived in, where I feel like maybe indie titles tend to do that a little bit more. So I like that, that you just kind of feel this world and these characters all while you're dealing with these bigger X-Men topics. So giving that 4.5 stars, and that is number 1. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite book was this week, and then last week's pick of the week was One World Under Doom, and here are some comments about that. Hopefully, guys, enjoyed. This is Comic Uno, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.